Now recognizes the chairman of the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee, gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Harper, for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg, for being here. And we don't lose sight of the fact that you're a great American success story. It is a part of everyone's life and business, sometimes maybe too often. But I thank you for taking the time to be here. And our concern is to make sure that it's fair. We worry because we're looking at possible government regulation here, certainly the self-governing, which has had some issues, and how you factor that. And we're trying to keep up with the algorithm changes on how you determine the prioritization of the news feeds, and you look at, well, it needs to be trustworthy and reliable and relevant. Well, who's going to determine that? That also has an impact. And even though you say you don't want the bias, it is dependent upon who's setting what those standards are in that. And so I want to ask you a couple of questions, if I may. And this is a quote from Paul Grewal, Facebook's VP and General Counsel. He said, "Like all app developers, Mr. Alexander Kogan requested and gained access to information from people after they chose to download his app." Now, under Facebook policy in 2013, if Cambridge Analytica had developed the "This is your digital life" app, they would have had access to the same data they purchased from Mr. Kogan. Would that be correct?
Congressman, that's correct. And a different developer could have built that app.
Okay, now, according to politifact.com, and this is a quote, the Obama campaign and Cambridge Analytica both gained access to huge amounts of information about Facebook users and their friends, and in neither case did the friends of app users consent, close quote. This data that Cambridge Analytica acquired was used to target voters with political messages, much as the same type of data was used by the Obama campaign to target voters in 2012. Would that be correct?
Congressman, the big difference between these cases is that in the Kogan case, people signed into that app expecting to share the data with Kogan, and then he turned around and in violation of our policies and in violation of people's expectations, sold it to a third-party firm, to Cambridge Analytica in this case.
Sure.
I think that we were very clear about how the platform worked at the time, that anyone could sign into an app and they'd be able to bring their information if they wanted and some information from their friends. People had control over that, so if you wanted, you could turn off the ability to sign into apps or turn off the ability for your friends to be able to bring your information. The platform worked the way that we had designed it at the time. I think we now know that we should have a more restrictive platform where people cannot also bring information from their friends and can only bring their own information, but that's the way that the system worked.
And whether in violation of the agreement or not, you agree that users have an expectation that their information would be protected and remained private and not be sold. And so that's something that, and a reason that we're here today. You know, and I can certainly understand the general public's outrage if they're concerned regarding the way Cambridge Analytica required their information. But if people are outraged because they use that for political reasons, would that be hypocritical? Shouldn't they be equally outraged that the Obama campaign used the data of Facebook users without their consent in 2012?
Congressman, what I think people are rightfully very upset about is that an app developer that people had shared data with sold it to someone else, and frankly, we didn't do enough to prevent that or understand it soon enough.
Thank you.
And now we have to go through and put in place systems that prevent that from happening again, and making sure that we have sufficient controls in place in our ecosystem, so that way developers can't abuse people's data.
Thank you, Mr. Zuckerberg. My time's expired. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentlelady